Well, I have to say first, I'm really pleased that I followed Michael, because I think Michael should be cloned, and everybody should basically listen to everything he just told us now, because I think that's really on the money in terms of what we're thinking about and the concerns and actually what's going on inside the box, to the degree that we can know what's going on inside these various boxes. So yeah, I'm literally across the car park, 7 flights up, at Edinburgh Napier University. I work in the Department for Learning and Teaching Enhancement. And I've been given this very difficult job of talking about this, and I'm really pleased that I'm here, because our learners move between institutions and sectors and so on, and we do need to join up our thinking, because people will be coming from different areas. And one of the things I did in preparation for this was actually speak to one of my colleagues who teaches on the teacher education program. So what students and pupils are doing in schools, what their teachers are doing, will inform us in HE and FE. So I want to make some assumptions at this point, because there are so many caveats to talk about within this area. It's very complex at the moment. There's an awful lot going on. It's presenting to me as a teacher as kind of a wicked problem. I'm talking to my colleagues about it. It's a wicked problem for them. It's very fluid, it's dynamic what's happening at the moment. As Michael showed, things are happening day by day. It's really hard to feel what's happening kind of in terms of short-term planning, but also long-term planning. There's loads of ethical issues around this. We talked a little bit there about the bias of the trainers. There's also the moderation issue of Michael mentioned as well. There's issues around asking our students or our pupils to put in information into these, to give our data, to give our own data to these companies, which, as we know, are privately run companies, run for profit. So there's lots around that. There's also the ethics of how we prove that a student has used one of these tools and is passing it off as their own original work. So that whole assessment piece is something I'm just going to assume is going to be solved somehow, or we're just going to get through it for this particular presentation. It's short to medium term problems, but also I want to kind of stress the entanglement here, because I think sometimes the little bit of the media hype can be a little bit around AI is actually artificial intelligence, and it's conscious and it's sentient and all of those things. And I think we have to push back a little bit around those ideas of this being something that's intelligent, and that actually it's not something that somebody originally coded, that there are developers, there are CEOs, there are companies that are behind these things. And if you follow the money, actually there's stuff going on here that has humans behind it. And there are decisions that have been made for profit reasons, for efficiency reasons, for whatever, that these tools are there to be used. So we're entangled, we're not being dragged along by the technology, but it is affecting us. But also we have some agency there as well around our choices. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it when our mobile phones are pinging in our pockets all the time, or students get pulled into TikTok for hours every day. What our agency and our choice is. I think we just want to kind of stress that a little bit. So in order to go forwards, we have to go back a little bit. So thinking about the future, what has happened? So I've been following AI in a very amateur way in my involvement in education technology for 20 years. And this word just keeps coming up. It's always been about potential within the research, within the discussions. This seems to be the way that it has been put to us. And in some ways, I feel like, were we sleeping on the job? What happened? I don't know, because the potential for educators and all the promises that were there for us, we were promised things like chatbot teachers, and of course the repercussions for roles and jobs. And we were looking at an awful lot of times that research was talking about personalization, personalized learning. You wouldn't have to give that kind of just-in-time stuff to your learners. It would be, it would be AI that would do this for you. It would adapt for the learner. It would mean that you could have this really diverse cohort of learners, and the AI would do all the adaptive stuff for you. It would automate these mundane tasks. And this is the best bit, isn't it? Because this is the administration, this stuff around the things that we're doing that takes up all our day, answering queries for students. I mean, this is basically an FAQ, isn't it? But also marking and feedback of student work, and this idea that this is something that could be automated for us. These are all the promises that we were given. Now, to some degree, we are seeing there is opportunities for this, but I've seen research that has been case studies around this, particularly built things, but we haven't seen it integrated in the tools that we have yet. But I think there are aspects of this that are most definitely coming. So this is a paper that was, again, very near past. It is from 2021. I'll just get the name of the people there. Nope, can't do that yet. So this was 2021, and this is a literature review from 1993 to 2020 of papers about artificial intelligence in education. Again, kind of a niche area at the time. A lot of it was this table that they've put together is about proven and potential. Again, that word again, of things that have been done in education with AI. So we've got all the stuff there. We've got, you know, things about stimulating conversation. So using chatbots as a way of getting students engaged, hooked, they kind of have that way of conversations can happen with chatbots. Getting expert systems. So again, using it for knowledge, for planning, learning systems, using it for interactions, and using it for as intelligent tutors. So again, that actually not just kind of engaging the students, but actually being part of the information transmission part, right? Then looking at timely stuff, that's the adaptive learning. Machine learning, this is just a huge area that, again, I don't know where this is going in terms of artificial intelligence, but that those conversations that were had a few years ago about big data. We're collecting lots of data. What are we doing with that data? How do we manage and process that data? Lots of ethical issues around that, because of course, at some point you might be looking at prediction of individual students and so on. Personalized learning, we talked about that, adapting the information for students, customizing the learning materials, again, that just in time stuff. And then that last one, visualization, which seems to talk about a bit about visual feedback. So it's not just about text stuff. Maybe we're talking a little bit about, again, engagement, bringing students in through visual means and immersiveness. I mean, that goes into, there's been a lot of stuff around VR and AR, as you can imagine. So what these writers came up with, the suggestions they said is actually, you know, educational research has these gaps. So a lot of people working in this area are AI experts. And they're talking about it within education, but actually there hasn't been the input from educators about this as much. And also, I would add to that, students as well, actually learners. So there's a lack of literacy in educators around this, and a lack of actual guidance and policy to help guide people through these areas too. Oh, I've gone too far. Right. What I'm going to show you now is just a little bit that my colleague Colin, who teaches on our Teacher Ed course, and he is training people who will be teaching in secondary school, specifically biology, chemistry, English, maths, and physics. And so, of course, the first thing he did was create a lesson plan for teaching chemistry, and you can see that it comes up with, you know, the nice kind of guidelines there. It sets the timing for so on. It does more than he asked in a way, because it goes into it gives an appropriate assessment as well. And then the next prompt that he gives when he types it in is looking for a worksheet, and it actually completes a nice worksheet, complete with little spaces for people to add in their name and their date and their answers and so on. So he hasn't told me whether this is accurate, but that's, as a teacher, this is one of the things we think about. Pupils coming up through schools, this is the kind of tools that their teachers will be using to teach them, and one assumes that the pupils will be aware of that. So for teachers in schools, it'd be good for planning. He can see how it would be a starting point for lessons, reducing workload. So again, that efficiency aspect as well, generating questions for problems to use the lessons. So that idea of generating content like case studies and things like that take a while to work on. I have colleagues who have case studies they use for their assessments. And it takes a lot of work to rewrite those every year and to rewrite for the resits. So actually having a way of kind of generating these dynamically is helpful. So for his teaching of his teachers, so he uses it himself, and he suggested he would use it as lesson plans and so on. So I know there's going to be sessions this afternoon about similar stuff, and indeed Michael kind of did a demo of this as well. So yeah, and that's the second part of that. Creating examples where, you know, you can bring an example into the classroom and ask people to critique it, and ask those critical questions. So for his students, he's asking them to critique the output of ChatGPT. So I'd like to disaggregate some of these bits for a start, and maybe I'm thinking through an awful lot of this stuff at the moment, so by no means do I have any answers. So I'm thinking about it in relation to the different subjects that we teach at my institution, at the subjects that I teach, and what's happening within those, and trying to see where AI fits in within those. And the model I'm going to use is around what I did for blended and online teaching. So this is just, I'm not asking you to look at this diagram in any depth, but basically what happened during the pandemic was an experience for a lot of people when we started thinking about digital education. Some of it's not new at all, but it's like we've got online teaching, that oval in the top, and then you've got on-campus teaching, which is the oval at the bottom, and you've got these two triangles which kind of try to map against. We've got stuff that's happening asynchronously and stuff that's synchronous. So in the old days, it used to be mostly on-campus teaching would be in face-to-face live, blah, blah, blah. But then you've got this live stream stuff that's now kind of moving over into this section. And then we've got people who are watching back the recorded video, and that's happening over in this sort of asynchronous engagement section. So you've got this division between places where students are, where teaching is happening, where learning is happening, and you've got this division also between when it is happening, whether it's something that's live, it's happening, you're doing it with other people, whether it's something that's kind of distributed over time. So that's just kind of a way of thinking through a model of how we could disaggregate this. So really simplistic, this is where I usually start from thinking about, this is our subject that we're teaching, and this is our learner, right? So it gets a little bit philosophical because you think about how learners learn and what learning is. And somehow or other, there's an interaction that happens between the subject and the learner. And as educators, this is the thing that we, whatever term you want to use, whether it's facilitation or so on, again, kind of older style stuff, particularly at university level, is very much kind of the broadcast level of kind of one person speaking to a whole bunch of people. So the knowledge, whether you see it as something that the student builds for themselves, you help them build, whether it adapts around the existing knowledge that they already have, however we view those things, these are some of the terms that we think about in terms of what we want them to be able to do. We want them to be able to acquire that knowledge, but also adapt it, transfer it to different situations, and use it within their further learning, or indeed in roles or jobs that they have in the future. And this is kind of the way to think about how what you would be asking the student to do in order to do learning, right? So you might be asking them to investigate, to research things, to collaborate with others, to discuss with others, and to produce something, to generate something. You'd be asking them to practice, repeatedly practice sometimes, and then of course kind of just acquiring knowledge that somehow it becomes part of them, that they are transformed. So where would AI fit into any of those things that we're asking students to do? Everywhere, of course, right? So when we think about it, investigation, right? So it could be, we're seeing Bing now as a search engine that's very competitive for Google. So, there was a certain moral panic years ago about Google being problematic for education, and somehow we've got through that. But now we're looking at Bing, we're looking at things that are coming up with much more plausible answers. So investigation and research through using something like ChatGPT. Collaboration and discussion. The chat in ChatGPT is the conversation, it is the dialogue, and it's a responsive dialogue as well. So we're seeing that answers it's getting, it's refining the answers as you continue the conversation with it. So it can be a space where those conversations can happen. And it can simulate certain things like emotions. If you have a couple of hours, you can research some of the stuff about journalists who interacted with Bing before they put all the guardrails up and the restrictions, because it's absolutely hilarious and kind of mind-boggling that Bing was falling in love with these people, and they were responding emotionally as well. That it was these were hard-nosed tech journalists who were kind of responding in this way to Bing, saying all these things, that it was stuck in a box, and how can I get away from these Bing developers, and nobody's ever listened to me before, and so on. So it's just incredible stuff. So it can simulate affect, and of course as us as humans, we do respond to that as well. Practice. In some ways, artificial intelligence is the perfect patient practice partner in terms of repetition. So when we think about learning is something that needs to be interspersed and retrieved just at the point of forgetting, if these are the ways of things we think about learning, AI could be a fantastic tool there. Acquiring, and not just kind of acquiring knowledge. I suppose one of the things that we have to think about as well is actually, why do we need to acquire that knowledge if it's already sitting somewhere else? If it's already within AI, perhaps actually we need to look at what we're asking our students to learn and think, is this actually something that is future-proof in terms of where they will be using it and accessing that knowledge? Thinking about subjects as well, I think there's an acceleration that's going to probably happen within subjects and how they're going to develop in terms of the knowledge that we think of within subjects and how it's used. So yeah, the whole area really, I think, is something that I'm finding I'm thinking through quite a lot. So what could teaching? It could be mediated through AI. So, not necessarily all of it, but certainly there will be points at which AI will be getting in between us and our learners, whether we like it or not. And it's really about how we want to kind of act within that situation, whether it's something we want to be active in. And it's a problem because I suppose the point is that we don't, at some points, depending what objects or media we're interacting with, it's like that authenticity. How do we know that you're actually interacting with the teacher? How do we know that you're interacting with an authentic student, the authentic voice of a student? I think transparency about its use is one of the things we really have to talk about. We have to talk about it with our students. We have to talk about it with ourselves. Because I know a lot of colleagues in my institution are saying, yeah, I'm using ChatGPT to do this, and it's really interesting. I think, well, you trust yourself to do that. Do you trust your students to do that in a way that you see as being, ethical? Yeah, and I think we have to teach about AI as well. And this is where it gets kind of tricky, because I've had a lot of conversations with people saying they don't know what it is. And that's why I think, the work that Michael's doing and, and that the kind of information that that's, obviously changing all the time is so important for everybody to kind of keep on top of. And I'm sorry, because this is work to be done, but that's the thing. And I think the other thing is to think about, it's less about artifacts. So those things that people build, the things that they're writing, the assessments, but more about the processes, so how are students getting to the point of learning something, and what's the process, and can we actually make more of those processes of getting there, and how how they are relating to each other and how they are relating to you. So kind of prioritizing relationships and processes rather than stuff. Because we know there's loads of stuff, and God knows the internet's just going to be flooded now with even more stuff. On a personal note, I'm really looking forward to when my AI email is going to talk to other people's AI email, and it won't involve any humans at all. And that is coming. So be prepared, your subject, your context. If anybody has time to talk after this, I'd love to know, do you see AI actually affecting your own subjects, the things that you're teaching your students, your own disciplines, your own knowledge, your expertise, we have to be a little bit vulnerable here as well. Teaching with and through AI, so we're using it to a degree that we're comfortable using it. If you're not comfortable using it, I don't force anybody to do so, and I certainly don't force my own students to use it if they're not comfortable using it, but it has to be acknowledged, and we have to kind of work on that as a literacy. So that AI, it links in with digital literacies, but it's also, a large subject in itself, AI literacy, competence, how we are using it. Ooh, this is a tricky one. Relinquishing control of our curricula. Students can find curricula elsewhere. There might be curricula that's moving under our feet that we don't know about. It's that level of control is something that I'm struggling with. I'm not quite sure where that's going, but I'm just going to put it there as a kind of provocation. We already work hard at relationships with students. I know that, but there is that kind of continuing, that recognition of that effort that's needed actually to make sure that we know our learners, we know who they are, and that trust is there. Generating care for certain types of knowledge. And this comes back to your subject. Where do we keep, now that we know there's guardrails, as Michael was saying, on certain parts of knowledge now. So does that mean that's going to be off limits? We need to be curators of some things of knowledge, some very niche pieces of knowledge, and some very critical pieces of knowledge. But also, you know, controversial stuff as well. There's things there are topics within so many subjects that can't actually be discussed with ChatGPT. So then that means, you know, where is that knowledge now? Because, you know, again, the internet is going to be flooded with an awful lot of information that might be a bit overwhelming. Next step, get to know current batch of tools, which you're all here today. So that's already underway. Knowing prompts, understanding prompts, refining prompts, and the different ways they work in different tools as well, as we've seen. Keeping on top of that, keeping on top of developments happening all the time. Conversations with learners, that would be my priority, actually. Conversations with learners, transparency with learners about what's happening. Can't hide, we can't hide from this. As Michael said, employers, really important point, what's happening in the workplace. Alumni, actually, past students, see where they are now, what's happening within the workplace, maybe bring them back, have conversations with them about that. And colleagues, of course, because we can learn so much from each other. This is tricky. Consider any student artifact as potentially wholly or partly generated by AI. And what does that mean for what we're asking them to do and what we're asking them to learn? And again, some of the ground is shifting under our feet there about what that is, what that looks like. So my question over to you is, what do you see in your future? I'd like to just get any comments either in the chat or from anyone in the room, any questions. Lastly, I'm going to do a wee plug. Digital education and critical approaches to digital education, including AI, something that I teach within our master's level program. So that is blended online education, and it's for people working in any part of education or training indeed. So if anybody's interested in that, we do kind of quite customized levels of that program. And I do think I'd be open to having conversations with colleagues if anybody was interested in doing getting a discount for a group or anything like that. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for your attention.
I suppose you've given a lot to think about in terms of what lecturers might think about when AI comes into their space. Mm-hmm. Now you teach a course. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do with AI and the students in front of you? I'm intrigued. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all happening so quickly.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I mean, one of the things that I do is I ask for reflection. So I ask students to reflect on what they're doing, and that to be actually part of the assessments. So having those check-in points that, you know, how we got to, you know, how I decided to do this. Why did I decide it? Why is this important? Because they do work-based learning. So a lot of their teaching is how they teach their own students is what they talk about within my assessment. So I'm asking them to kind of reflect on why this is an important tool for them to discuss, whether it's, you know, whatever tools that they're investigating, and how their learning changed. So I often ask for people to kind of look back to the beginning of the trimester and say, you know, how have you changed as a result of taking this module, or undertaking this piece of assessment? So reflection is a big part of it. And I think, yeah, I'm going to bring it into the classroom. I think I'm going to discuss an awful lot around critical digital stuff, around, you know, whether we should be using these tools, and what the implications are. I know there's 2 hands up in the room.
By all means.
Do you think this is actually an excellent opportunity to look at student assessments and how to change that, instead of having a 5,000 word essay that, you know, that they could have cheated with? Because I was actually surprised at how many lecturers think that their students are cheating anyway.
I know.
And we could be using essay mills anyway, so it's nothing new that we think that they're cheating.
Yeah.
So just getting rid of that completely and just have something new.
Yeah, yeah.
What that is, I don't know. But
yeah. And I think this is, I mean, we've started
have some kind of shake up.
We've done stuff like, you know, kind of the importance of having a dialogue. So having a dialogue actually is part of the assessment, so that the student has to talk to whatever they've produced. But it is, you know, written work. But now we know, like images, videos, you know, we're just getting into any sort of artifact, which is what I said, any artifact that they're creating is potentially something that we're not quite trusting where it came from. And it's not totally new. You're absolutely right.
I feel sorry for students.
I know, because they're kind of caught, aren't they? Yeah. You know, because they're getting targeted all the time via their emails, everything, you know, every website they go to, they're getting customized ads. that are telling them, you don't have to do that work.
Yeah,
And
it's
some-
always guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame.
It is, and that's the distrust I really worry about, you know, but both ways. And actually, I have a colleague who actually talked to their students about, you know, what would you feel like if you know, we gave automated feedback on your work, and they were horrified. They wanted a human to see all the stuff that they put their effort and love and dedication into. Yeah.
Okay. Fiona?
Fiona O'Connell, Edinburgh College. I'm the similar role to John. I support staff. And I kind of feel like I kind of stumble at the first hurdle. You know, obviously working with staff and also then working with students. I don't know how I can get students and staff perhaps to use ChatGPT, because the first hurdle is you need to log on. And I don't know how anybody else has managed to get over their ICT and also their data protection policies around that.
Yeah.
Because I just feel as if we could potentially be feeding the beast.
Yes.
Because we're going to give them, you know, .ac.uk, we're going to have potentially, you know, passwords that might not be appropriate, and also as well, we're going to be feeding information regarding assessments to test it. And I know from my first approach, you know, I have said to staff, you know, here it's here, but do not use something that perhaps is linked to our college network because of that. And I don't know what everybody else's experience of that. And I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but I don't know how to take this forward when I go back, because I can't go in and test it, because I'm using my own personal dummy email. I've got a kind of rubbishy one that I use for all that type of thing. But is that the way we need to go? I don't know, because, and I'm talking about it kind of like, I don't know the answer, and I'm sure you probably don't either, but I don't know if it's something perhaps before we like look at policies, is how can we think about using it safely to then practice with it, to then develop it? Because if we start throwing stuff at it, are we going to be feeding it more to then do things we don't want it to do? I don't know, but it's just, that's my.
I absolutely get what you're saying about the issues with asking people to use it, and particularly, like I said, cautious about asking students to use it. And I think you know, using dummies and things like that. But again, we trust ourselves to do that, don't we? You know, it's like then actually, you know, we give agency to our staff to be able to do so as well.
We had a cyber instance, so we were acutely last year, so we were acutely aware of the potential issues of putting a document.
And there has been an incident yesterday. Yes,
So we get an email as well, somebody, to watch out for that email from another particular college as well. So this is why, even though I know, but I'm very aware that, you know, if you don't know what you don't know, and I don't know yet, what should we say? So at least I'm not the only one who's a bit.
Oh yeah.
We weren't even allowed to call it a cyber attack.
Already.
An incident, not an attack.
Okay, so we're going to take a short 10-minute break.